think one of the things that I'm most excited about mass consumer adoption for VR is that you can actually do real social experiences. When a person, like, you have a head and you have hand movements and you have body language, like, it's like a higher fidelity, a higher bandwidth form of communication than just like a Skype or 2D video. So there actually is a sense of presence there, and that you feel like you're in a room with someone else, and that's only going to increase.
Yeah.
And I think will only be more impactful when it's people you care about as well. And the problem is like of my friend group, all of which are in like tech and, fall into your early adopter category, I'm the only one that owns a VR device, which is insane.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Inside VR and AR. This is our mostly weekly podcast and video cast, streaming live on Facebook here in San Francisco. My name is Austin, and then to my right, we have Robert Scoble, our other host and the sort of foremost mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality expert in the world, in my opinion, or one of them. And then today our guest, Amitt Mahajan. Did I say it right?
Amitt Mahajan, close enough.
Amitt Mahajan.
This is why I don't even try. I said, "Who are you?" Because first of all, I can't remember somebody named Joe Smith, much less.
But we do know who he is. So from Presence Capital, investing exclusively in VR and AR, and you said I think the first fund to actually focus exclusively on mixed reality. And yeah, so if you want to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you've been working on.
Sure, yeah. So, I was one of the managing partners of Presence Capital. Recovering entrepreneur. I started 2 companies before. Both were early on platforms. So my first company was a social gaming company called My Mini Life, which ended up getting bought by Zynga. And after we were acquired, we launched the game Farmville. Using the technology we built. So it was very early on Facebook and on the social platforms. And then my second company was a mobile marketing company that was bought by Google in 2015. And so, when we started Presence, a lot of it was looking at, what are kind of the similar trends that we've seen from Facebook and from mobile, and how are those going to play out in VR and AR? Now, I don't think there's a direct analogy, and I think that's a big mistake to think there's a direct analogy. But there's a lot of things that still kind of exist. So, for example, one of our big theses is that when you're early to a platform, the platform owners are willing to work with you to actually give you like marketing and distribution and outsized attention. Whereas now, if you went to Apple and said, "Hey, I have a new iPhone app," they're gonna wonder, just go use the store, right? Like, leave us alone. Versus on in VR, you can get a hold of the folks at Oculus, pretty high up at Oculus and HTC, and they want to work with you to make this industry a success.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was example, but we basically believe that by investing early in this industry, there's a lot of opportunities. One for financial return for our LPs, but also just to help kind of foster a new generation of entrepreneurs to help grow something from scratch.
And we're really at the beginning of this new industry, right? Most people, when I give speeches around the world, most people don't have VR yet, even amongst wealthy audiences and entrepreneurial audiences, which you would expect to be early adopter style audiences. Usually it's less than 1% have VR. And there's a lot of confusion because one, is Google Cardboard VR or is HTC Vive a VR? Well, they're both VR, but they both have very different capabilities, and the consumers haven't even really started looking into it. They just start hearing the hype on Facebook or Twitter about, this is the coolest thing I've ever played, right? And so our industry has a long way to go before we get to the kinds of mass market adoption rates that we see Android around the world having, right?
Yeah, totally. And so, we and look, we're believers in the technology, but I'm actually very bearish on consumer VR adoption. I think you have to be real about it, in the sense that it's going to be a while before it's there. So the belief that you can go and build a high revenue business today on VR, I just think at least on a consumer-focused high-revenue business is not, I think, entirely truthful or representative of reality. So,
Yeah, the top selling game I think was $3 million in the first year, right?
That was I think Eve may have done more.
All right.
Yeah, they said that they invested. The CEO of CCCP said that they invested $30 million and they made about $25 million back across all platforms.
Okay.
Wow.
So you have an idea of like where this where kind of the curve is, and this is like a game that was heavily promoted. It was included in Oculus, like with every Rift. So they had an attached fee with every single Rift. And so like I don't think it's necessarily there yet. But the thing, and also like you said, it's very confusing. Like you say VR, and people think the Vive, and then like the cardboard and so on. But like I think in order to get to actual mass consumer adoption, like you kind of need to have VR by default in your life. Because most people aren't going to seek it out. So, the biggest trend for that is basically the mobile phone companies implementing VR by default in their platform. So, like, Google just launched Daydream in fall.
But even then, that's confusing because Daydream only is 3 degrees of freedom. And here we're throwing out new terms that you have to learn, right?
Yeah.
You can't move around. You can't play super hot in a Daydream. And I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. All of the coolest shit coming out of this industry is 6 degrees of freedom, HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, and Sony PlayStation VR. But those are too nerdy and too expensive.
Well, you can make the argument. I mean, like let's take a step back, right? Like, if you look at the first iPhone that came out, it was 2G, didn't have GPS. There's the really famous, and then when the first iPod came out, there was that really famous Commander Taco /dot comment like small and doesn't have something. It's like and lame, and it's like just. He's been like quoted endlessly for that for like his entire life. He's been labeled by that. But like, so when you look at like, the first version of any technology that comes out, like today, like the idea of a phone not having GPS is absurd. But the first iPhone didn't have GPS, right?
And the first iPhone didn't have a development platform either.
Yeah, it didn't have development platform. There's no in-app purchases. Like, when our first version of Farmville didn't have in-app purchases either, which is insane when you think about Zynga and like, how that company was built. So like, these products, they can iterate really quickly. But I think more importantly is that you can't introduce consumers to too much at once. I think if the first iPhone looked like the iPhones we have today, it would actually be like way too much for people to handle. Yeah. Like I think you have to actually piecemeal out technology so people have time to adapt and learn and get familiar with new paradigms. So I think even just 360, I know we're like shooting guns and stuff in VR, and it's like so natural to us, but I think for a lot of people, even just like I have to like move people's heads, to like get them to realize you can look behind you. So when we look at there's two things about the mobile platforms that I think are really interesting. One is that by having it included in Android by default, and then more importantly, getting all the manufacturers on board and supporting that spec, it's easy then now you have a spec that's just iterating, which is like an easier thing to sell to people rather than like a brand new platform. So I think what Google's doing is awesome because they're essentially just baking it into Android. Yeah. And eventually, with enough phone cycles, everyone's just going to wake up one day and be like, wait a second, my phone supports, a bunch of VR features. Maybe not all of them, but it supports a lot of them. Yeah. And I think that's going to be the thing that eventually may cause a lot of people to wake up and be like, okay, maybe I should go get a dedicated VR set. Or when a new phone comes out that has 6 degrees of freedom or hand tracking, I'm going to go out of my way to upgrade because I know the value of those features now.
And that's coming this year. Both from Apple and Google, they're going to go 6 degrees of freedom by the end of the year. Apple, in particular, is going to wake up this market with a new iPad, 3 new iPhones, new TV, new glasses, all that do full-on mixed reality, which means you get 6 degrees of freedom VR in these products, and you get your mobile phone, and everybody gets woken up, whether you're an Apple fan or not. Even if you're a kid in Mumbai, you're going to watch that keynote, right? Even though you can't afford an iPhone, you can't afford Apple products, and there's no Apple store near you, you're going to buy a $200 Android phone eventually that does it. You're going to still watch the keynote so you know what's coming in the future, right?
I hope you're right.
I'm right. I'm right. I have so many sources saying that I'm right about this, that it's just when. It's just when. We're arguing about when. Is it coming in June or September? And keep in mind, they're going to announce it at least 4 months before they ship because they have to show it to us without any leaks. And that means they have to show it to us before they give it to the FCC for approvals. That's a 3-month process for Apple. And so we need 4 months in advance. If it comes out in June, they're going to show it to the developers and explain this new world to developers because they need content built for this new phone, right? If the phone ships and there's nothing on it, then people will say this is stupid, right?
Okay.
And that'll be really bad, right?
So what do you think the primary use cases are going to be for that device?
I believe Steve Jobs and Tim Cook had a conversation about this, and they called it the future of television. When you get one of these glasses on, you get as many virtualized screens around you as you want. So they're already talking to Discovery so that when you do a gesture or you use your eyes or however you're going to impel the menu to come up, just like in a HoloLens, you use your hand, you open your hand, and that's called the Bloom gesture, right, in front of the sensors. And then all of a sudden a menu pops up, a virtual menu. And then you get as many screens as you want around you. That's the start. So who doesn't want infinite screens around them? I do. I want more and more screens like the one I'm looking at right here.
So you basically think that's going to be mostly consumption of existing 2D content.
That's where it starts, right?
Yeah. That's where it starts, but that's what we think V1 is.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that.
But I think they're going to go full-on mixed reality. They have 600 engineers in Israel working on just the 3D sensor. That's going to be the key part of this. And they're going to let you do things like HoloLens, where monsters are coming out of the walls or whatever. Full-on augmented reality, full-on putting shit on top of physical things, right? Virtual things on top of physical things, just like the HoloLens. Anybody who's seen the HoloLens knows this. Very few people have seen the HoloLens. Microsoft this morning announced they've sold only in the thousands of HoloLenses, right? And they're betting their entire company in this product, which shows you how far we have to go before we get mainstream mass adoption numbers. Yeah. But I think Apple's going to wake everybody up because at least you're going to see what it does. And what it does is important to show 2D screens because it's like you said, we have to take people on a journey. It takes time to discover this.
If you're a developer and they announce this in June and announce that it's coming out in September or October,
or even January,
what do you jump and start building on that day?
Well, I think a lot of companies that Amitt is funding already are doing exactly the right things, right? Baobab, we talked about at Sundance, launched a new game called Asteroids, or a new experience. It's not really a game. I don't even know what you call these things. This because they're not films.
We don't have really terminology. Like this is just kind of being developed as we go, right? It's like 3D immersive storytelling, but it's like too many words, you know, like. I don't know, someone's going to coin something good at some point. Yeah. I guess the experience is the word everyone uses, but it's kind of not a great word.
We need ways to tell people what these things are, but it's hard to explain it to an audience that doesn't even have VR yet, right? Yeah. Many people who are watching us right now don't have VR. They're interested in it. They know that something big is coming, so they're trying to get into it, or they might want a job in this industry, or they might want to play it eventually, and they know that within 2 or 3 years, they're going to have it on their face or in their homes. But we don't know how to explain these things to people yet in a really crisp way.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the hopes, is that as there's kind of more of these devices out there, it's just kind of there's more of like a show your friend type of effect. I mean, I don't know how many demos you must have given at this point for VR.
A lot, but this is the other problem with VR. The demos are, you put somebody in the headset for 5 minutes. Oh, let's take you through Google Earth. That's cool. Let's take you through Super Hot. That's cool. Let's take you, through something. And we never even get to a really nice movie experience inside VR, like Dear Angelica, which just came out on the Oculus. Beautiful film, right? And very emotional, very, very amazing. But we don't even get to show that to people. So they don't have any clue that's coming, right? Yeah. And in fact, when you do get an iPhone or an Android with Tango or whatever, with these Daydream devices, you're going to play games for the first couple months because that's what's really, really cool on this. And then you're slowly going to discover, Chris Milk has Within on us, and now I can watch a bunch of music videos and a bunch of movies and a bunch of documentaries in 3D in 360. And we haven't even gotten to things like Dear Angelica yet. So it takes months for the average user to get to the place where they have a context about what's coming, right?
Yeah.
Even if they have it on their face. It's
By
gonna
the
take
way,
months.
I think that's a good thing that like in VR can no longer be demoed in like a 10-minute time frame. Just means that we have enough decent content that actually sustains owning one of these devices. So hopefully by the time like, most people have a VR device, there's enough content. And not just like pulling in existing 2D content, like like we were talking about, but actual like native 3D and content that was developed for VR devices.
Yeah.
And to go back to your question, we've also invested in a company called Big Screen, which pulls your existing devices into VR, makes it like a social experience. So they're watching movies together, they're playing like games together and so on. So I think one of the things that I'm most excited about mass consumer adoption for VR is that you can actually do real social experiences. Because right now it's kind of like we really lack density, so it's really hard to be able to build these truly social experiences. And if you've like one of the most compelling things that you talk to anyone that's used like Oculus's Toy Box or even like AltSpace or some of these other services is that the feeling you get. Because there's just something like when a person like you have a head and you have hand movements and you have body language, like it's like a higher fidelity, a higher bandwidth form of communication than just like a Skype or 2D video or like text or whatever. And so there actually is a sense of presence there, and that you feel like you're in a room with someone else, and that's only going to increase.
Yeah.
And I think will only be more impactful when it's people you care about as well. And the problem is like of my friend group, all of which are in like tech and fall into your early adopter category, I'm the only one that owns a VR device, which is insane.
Yeah.
And so
I've been playing paintball in Rec Room, and it's super fun, and it's like this mind-blowing thing that these are real people and you can wave to them and all these things. But yeah, I don't have a single friend that I could go play paintball against.
Yeah. Well, wait until most of your friends have a new iPhone and most of your friends have glasses on. Then it really starts, right? At Sundance, I was keeping track how many people have iPhones. It was about 80%, right? Most people at Sundance have iPhones. Most people who go to Coachella have iPhones. We know that from talking to the nerd who watches the traffic going through, that big music festival. So high-end music festivals, high-end, South by Southwest, most people have iPhones. So when Apple explains this stuff to the world, I believe all of those people are going to get glasses, and that kicks off this game really, right? Because then everybody else has to explain themselves. Magic Leap. Facebook is working on glasses. They just bought iTribe in Copenhagen, an eye sensor company for glasses. So they're working on it. And they just hired Hugo Berra just this week from Xiaomi, right? And he used to be an executive at Google. So now he's running VR and AR for Zuckerberg, right? And Microsoft has HoloLens. They're betting their whole company on it. And I've talked to their executives, and they're very aggressive. They're going to come out with small glasses the same way. Yesterday, Vuzix visited my house, and they showed me a 4-ounce pair of glasses that are pretty nice. Apple's going to be 2 ounces.
So from an investment perspective, you've talked about sort of mass market adoption. Do you have like numbers in mind of what you want to see in terms of like monthly, would you call it like monthly active users, just people who put on a headset once a month?
Oh man, see, the problem is like, MAU is not even it's not a compelling metric for consumer.
Yeah.
From social and mobile gaming, we'd be looking at daily active users.
Yeah.
Right. Something like, and weekly active is like, okay. So like, I think that weekly active user, WAU is actually a better metric for VR. Just because, it's really hard. And I was telling you this earlier that it's very difficult the issue with VR is I don't think it's form factor or like lack of content or even lack of install base. I think it's just like even with all of those problems solved, the real issue is that you're withdrawing yourself from reality, and you have to be in like a safe space to be able to do that. And you have to be in a mindset where you're able to step away and actually like put on one of these headsets. I know it's different for AR, so let's just table that for now. But like,
like HoloLens.
Yeah, like HoloLens.
Split HoloLens separate from HTC Vive, right?
Yeah, well, basically, it's when you're completely blacking out the real world and replacing it with a virtual world. You have to be in a situation where like you're not going to get like someone's not going to bother you in the real world. So
Especially like you have noise canceling headphones on. Like when I'm in VR, I'm like, someone could just be like standing over me with a baseball bat.
and by the way, that's like it's it's a very common prank that you see is that like someone's wearing a VR headset and there's people are taking photos with them, behind them and so on. So like,
Oh, and by the way, if you're really cool, you do things like when there's fire, you blow hot air on them.
yeah.
There was at Sundance, there was an experience called Tree, and they did exactly that. At some points, when you got high enough, they blew a fan on you, so you felt the wind. Because you were up high in a tree, and when the forest started burning down, you felt heat on your face. They turned on a heat lamp on you, and it was really cool, right? And by the way, I think this market is bifurcating into stuff we'll play at home and then stuff we'll play in a theme park kind of situation.
100%.
The Void is a great example of this. This is a company in Salt Lake City that makes the Ghostbusters experience in New York City, right? When you go to Times Square, you go to the Wax Museum, and you pay, I don't know, $40, and you get a special headset, a special gun, a special backpack, and you get 7 of your friends in there, and now you're shooting ghosts. Yeah. And they do mind-blowing mixed reality kind of stuff, right?
Will you be surprised at how easy it is to fool your brain into thinking that something's actually happening when it's not? So like the Void, continuing on that example, they have this thing where you like step into a virtual elevator in the VR world, and then basically in the real world, you're on this platform that's just it's just shaking.
Yeah.
And it's enough. That is enough to fool you to believe that you're actually moving up, even though you're just like you're in exactly the same place and you haven't moved at all.
Yeah.
So
and your mind goes to vertigo because you're looking outside of a building. It's actually a painter's platform, right? And instinctively, I felt like I was falling, so I grabbed onto the virtual rail that was in front of me.
Yeah.
And there was a physical rail there.
I know,
really
right?
freaked me out.
By the way, that just goes to show you too, if they hadn't perfectly mapped the real world to the virtual world, it's very easy to see how you could like think there's a railing there and like lean on it and then just like fall to the floor, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely these. I 100% agree with you, and so we do have a thesis in the fund, which is that. For high-end virtual reality, I think we're going to see mass consumer adoption potentially first in like real-world type applications, so like the Void and so on. But our bets that's probably going to happen first in China.
Yeah.
And
in fact, I'm hearing that there's about 1,000 already VR arcades that are under development just in China.
Yes.
That's how mind-blowing that market is. 721 million internet users, and they are mobile crazy, right? You think Americans in Silicon Valley people are mobile crazy? Heck no, right? You know this by going to China.
Yeah, I was there last year, and just they had just halls and halls at this trade show dedicated to virtual reality, and like it's all custom hardware. So like, there'd be like there's one thing where there's a tank, and there's like 10 people on a tank with VR headsets on. It's just like moving around. There's a game where you're like sitting on like, it looks like a pommel horse, and it's just like shaking. It's like a robotic horse, and it's like a horse riding game. And so they're actually, it's not just the content itself, but they're also creating all these machines that like are almost like rides.
Yeah.
And the idea is that you can go take a space in a building, and they have all this real estate developments happening, and the real estate developers are actually pushing this because it's another attraction that they could put into their buildings to bring people in. So
Sundance was mind-breaking, and we should come back to China because I think China is really an interesting topic we should spend some more time on. But at Sundance, there were a couple firsts. Mayubi was one of them. It's a 40-minute experience where you're in a kid's room with as a robot, and the kid is talking to you because you're the robot. Really pretty interesting film. Maybe not that bleeding edge. It's not going to be the Star Wars, the thing that comes along that changes our culture, but it's an important first step. And there was also another thing called Heroes, where the first half of the experience was done in VR, and then the second half of the experience was done in the HoloLens. And they had 2 dancers that you were a professional dancer. They were amazing dancers. And you were up on stage with them. And when you got into the HoloLens, they were dancing around the room in different places. It was really pretty cool, but gives you a little taste, and was the first one at Sundance of mixed reality. I think next year there's going to be an explosion in mixed reality. Does that match some of your thesis that you think mixed reality is really going to come on strong in 2018, 2019?
I mean, as far as investable on the consumer side, it's like we're not really betting that way. Almost everything
You should be, because Apple's coming.
Well,
and you
well-
know what happens when Apple comes.
It's fine. I mean, let's put, the way I see it is that the iPhone came out in 2007, Uber was launched in 2010, Snapchat was launched in 2012. I think we'll be fine if we wait to see what they launch first. But that being said, we.
I can't wait to be in your office the day after.
Oh no, I'm excited.
In fact, we should have you back on the show the day after.
Dude,
after
I would
launches.
love. I would love to. I think. They're the big missing piece. If you look at the entire industry landscape, they're literally holding everything back at this point because of what you said. Everyone has iPhones, right? So I'm 100% like on the
They're holding
go
a
Apple.
lot back, not just mixed reality, right? They're holding back wireless power. That's going to be mind blowing from what I hear. They're holding back all sorts of processor and GPU technologies that are really, really small, right? And they're holding back all sorts of fun stuff that's going to be 3D maps, SLAM-based, these new SLAM-based maps, which, again, another term we all have to learn. What the heck is SLAM? Well, that means that your glasses see the world in 3D and know where the glasses are because it sees that world around you. It was actually a technique developed for the Mars rover so that the Mars rover could navigate around the surface of Mars without our input, because it takes 15 minutes to get a packet up to the Mars rover from Earth, right? And by that time, it drove off the cliff if it didn't know where to go.
It's also technology being used in self-driving cars. Nowhere to do.
And I expect it, and I just heard at CES, I saw a company, God, I forget the company's name now, Ionite.
One of our portfolio companies.
You're in all the cool companies, aren't you? Ionite is a company coming out of Stanford that does inside-out VR tracking using this new SLAM-based technique, right? It's pretty good.
So Ionite, that was actually like the third investment we made. And I remember meeting with the founders, and their chief scientist was actually at Stanford for a very long time working on the Stanford self-driving car project, which became the Google self-driving car project. Yeah. And this is hard technology. This is not like easy stuff to build. You can kind of get an idea of what it's doing here. But part of untethering like all these VR headsets and getting rid of these external cameras that are facing you is building what's known as inside-out tracking, which is using a camera or a sensor built in the headset itself in order to figure out where you are. Right. And so when we talk about what's the GPS of VR, I think this is one of the technologies that once we have it, we're going to look back and be like, I cannot even believe that we used to have cables attached to our head. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And everyone in the industry kind of agrees that this is what's going to happen. It's just kind of technical constraints right now, but we're on the cusp, right?
Yeah. So the HoloLens are. I mean, it's already been proven out that you can do it. That's what the HoloLens has, right? Yeah. So at this point, it's about getting. Improving the quality of it, making sure that it's fast enough to be able to run on mobile phones, and so on. So we're super excited about this company. And this is so when you were saying okay, well, how are we looking at 2018, 2019 in terms of mixed reality? The way that we're betting on the space is actually in a lot of the core technology that we believe is going to power this, because at this point, we know that stuff is like computer vision is incredibly valuable. So when you think about what mixed reality is, from a technical perspective, it's a computer that sees the world around it, and then based on the context of what it's seeing, is able to add information back to the world and then to the user. And so in order to actually provide the technology for this, there's a few missing parts. One is, first of all, understanding the world around you, which is computer perception. So there's Ionite. There's companies that are doing object identification. So for example, if I look at
Yowza is one of those. Yowza from Israel.
Oh, Yowza. Yeah.
They came and showed me that stuff. And 16 engineers in Tel Aviv, and they do mind-blowing AI so they take a 3D picture of your world, 1/30th of a second, right? Because there's 30 of them a second, and it can see the can on the table, and it knows it's a separate object from the table, which really lets you do mind-blowing, cool stuff on the table, right? Because little rats could run around the table and come up to the surface of the can, and then stuff could happen on the can, right? Because it knows it's a can, and it knows it's a LaCroix in front of me, right?
Yes. Well, so let's talk about that first. Let's break that down, right? So in order to you look at this can, you're oh, this is a LaCroix can. this, it's orange flavor. By the way, you can buy it on Amazon right now, like do the Starburst hand signal or whatever to purchase it immediately. In order to do that, you essentially need to be able to use image recognition and computer vision to figure out what these objects are, right? So we already have some version of computer perception in our world, and we're seeing it in like apps like Shazam.
Yeah.
Right. So when you think about Shazam, it's it allows computers to understand sound.
Or Blipbar, I guess.
Oh yeah, Blipbar is another version of that. But I think the one most people have probably seen is Shazam on their phone.
Yeah.
It's like it listens to a song on the radio, it tells you what it is, or this commercial lets you tell you what product it is. So one of our first theses in the fund was for AR was there's going to be a Shazam for everything.
Yeah.
Right, so I can literally take a picture of a chair, and based on the way that chair is shaped and its color and the contours and its design, the computer is able to use all that information against a database of every chair in the world in order to tell you that this is a chair from Neiman Marcus or wherever, and then this is how much it costs, and if you want to, so you can enable all these really great applications based on top of that. And so when we look at mixed reality, we're betting on it that way.
Yep. Me too. I wrote a book on it called The Fourth Transformation, right? And right on the cover, we say how AR and AI are going to change everything.
Yes. Yes. So
could we go through a bunch of companies and just give me a fast reaction?
Sure. Yeah. Go for it.
Magic Leap.
I think what they're building and their promise of the tech that they're developing, I think is really, really great. I'm not under a Magic Leap NDA, so I haven't.
Me neither.
I haven't seen it, right? So, but I've seen comparable technology, and I do think that it is going to be the future, that we do need some form of like the other piece that's missing in AR is display. Right? Like, how do you actually display something in someone's face without putting giant screens or whatever? And so the idea of using, the actual physics of light to do that make a ton of sense.
Yeah. But there was a lot of bad PR about Magic Leap because they were showing investors an optic that was mind-blowing, but wasn't manufacturable.
Yeah, or you can't miniaturize it, which happens with really hard tech, right? But someone will crack it someday. But I think it's a really good glimpse to the future. I hope they pull it off because it's good for all of us.
What do you think philosophically of their approach of building in a vacuum compared to like even Microsoft is like putting these things out in the world? And
I mean, I'm a product guy, right? Like I've been building products for a very long time, and if you study the history,
and make sure you stay close to the mic.
Oh yeah, if you study the history of companies that have traditionally built in a vacuum like that, it doesn't always pan out. I think Apple is the one company in the world that's actually made that work, but almost always when you have the Segway is a really good example of this, right?
I had dinner with Ted Shilwitz at Sundance, the futurist from 20th Century Fox, and he's been investing in a bunch of things, including Magic Leap. And he says nobody knows what Magic Leap's doing. They haven't shown you what they're really doing. And he says it's going to be a big deal, even after all that PR and whatnot. So,
I love this industry because there's so much of that. Every person has an angle of no, you're you don't know what's really behind the curtain, right? The prestige. So
So here's another company. He invested in ODG. What do you think about ODG?
We're actually not investors in ODG.
That's fine. Just tell me what you think. I'm sure
I love those guys. They're just producing good stuff, and they show it, and they're at the conferences, and they're accessible. I think that's dope, right? And they've built some glasses that are really great, and they're pushing the industry forward. Yeah, they're awesome.
Meta.
Meta, we are investors in Meta. So Meta's great. Big vision, lots of really, really great talented team. And they're also taking a different tack. I think a lot, if you think about AR, there's a lot of different ways to approach it, depending on the market you're going after. And Meta is interesting, and the reason that we did it was because they're very focused on a specific use case, which is you're in your office, you need to use AR as part of your workflow, and so it's connected to your laptop. It's not meant to be, it's not meant to be untethered, which allows you to do a lot more, change up your design a bit, and actually provide a better user experience for those use cases.
I saw some prototypes, and I'm giving a speech at Stanford on Monday night with Mayron, the founder of hold on a second, the founder of Meta, and the prototypes I saw were 4-ounce pair of glasses that look like a black piece of glass around, and they're working with Loomis on the optics. So 4 ounces I think, is the turning point. I think that becomes usable at work. The HoloLens is too heavy and too big to wear for more than an hour. My nose starts hurting when I wear it, and it's really dorky. I mean,
How much do spectacles weigh? Obviously, there's way less tech in there, but I'm just trying to get.
I would say the Snap spectacles or Snapchat spectacles are around 3 ounces, somewhere in that range, 2 ounces maybe.
At what point is that becoming?
And they don't even have screens, right?
Yeah.
They don't really have a huge amount of computing power. They just have a camera and a few
battery.
lights on the other side, right? And a switch. So,
I definitely want to talk about spectacles, but I just one thing on the just want to make one maybe counterpoint to what you were just saying about the unusability in workplaces. I think that if you solve a problem in like a 10x way for a business, the form factor does not matter.
right.
Like it doesn't matter.
You'll put up with it to save $1 billion, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's a big macro bet that we're making on AR, is that like, so almost all the we have done some like application type investments. We're in a company called Scope AR, which they basically superimpose like maintenance and machinery instructions on top of an engine or something. So if you're like a mechanic and you're working on like a car engine, it'll show you like, okay, put the wrench here and loosen this bolt. And it's kind of like it's like paint by numbers, where you just kind of follow the instructions that are in front of you.
Yep.
And so the idea behind that is that like their stuff is adaptable to any AR platform, but they work on the HoloLens. And if you're, for example, in a situation where the only way for you to perform your task is by using this device, you're going to use it, right? Like if you go to a car shop today or a mechanic's, like a garage today, the stuff's not built for form factor. It's built for like usability and just like getting work done.
Yeah.
And so, I believe that, a big part of these technologies is that like and something that's doesn't matter if Apple does anything at all, is that when you have when you have these technologies used by businesses, you can sidestep the cost, the form factor, and consumer adoption, and still create a decent business on top of that.
You sound like the guys at Microsoft Windows Mobile when I worked there, who told me, "Oh, we're going after enterprise because there's no money in the consumer market," and they turned out to be really wrong.
I do think they'll converge at some point.
Yeah.
But it may turn out that in order to perform a lot of the really great like enterprise tasks, that you need a Magic Leap device or a Meta or a HoloLens, something that's like higher fidelity. It's harder to miniaturize, and eventually we'll miniaturize it down. Like you think about it, the BlackBerries were originally used, and that was a big company. They were originally used by enterprises to do email.
Are you in DAQRI? DAQRI's a helmet that does augmented reality at like oil refineries, stuff like that.
We've seen it, and I'm a believer in the vision. I think it's with all of these companies, I like want everyone to win because I think it's good for the entire industry. It's more of a wait and see. I haven't seen their latest prototype.
Yeah.
What about Doppler Labs? Do you know them? It's
that's
augmented reality.
That's a context switch, because that's augmented reality audio, which is it's underway. There's a revolution happening in audio. I have some new headphones that have 6 microphones in just the little headphone buds, and they're mind blowing. And Apple has AirPods, and Doppler has headphones that do mind blowing noise canceling and other things to make your audio better.
So you can like turn down the volume on the chatter.
They sold
in
them
the
at Coachella, the big music festival, and they made the music better. They really did. But
I obviously believe in that future. I think that those are really revolutionary technologies. I think like stuff like live translation could be really interesting. Where I'm really excited for that is when you start to pair that with some sort of camera.
Yeah.
Right. So like if you think about you pair like Snapchat spectacles where you have a outward facing camera, and then the audio is mostly the feedback.
Interesting enough, I hear the Apple glasses don't have a camera. They do have a 3D sensor, so is that a camera? they could look like a camera.
So they're using an IR sensor of some sort or a depth sensor. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like the issue with the camera is not like if it's a color camera or depth camera or whatever. It's but the social stigma associated with it.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why they're leaving. That's one of the reasons they're leaving it out. The other reason is they want to have really ultra lightweight glasses, and they're getting rid of all the compute power out of the glasses, including head tracking, because the head trackers are in the new AirPod headphones. And so if you get these new Apple glasses, you're going to have to wear the AirPod headphones to do this stuff, right? You're going to have to use them in combination.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So they're basically using the sensors in the headphones themselves as a way of,
Yeah.
interesting. That could work. I could see that being, I mean, I'm a electrical engineer, but theoretically it seems right.
Yeah. They have a new protocol that one of the I shared on Facebook from one of the magazines or one of the tech blogs about the new Bluetooth protocol that Apple came up with to make it easier to hook these things up to a phone and eventually hook them up to the glasses.
That makes sense.
And people love it. It's like
my son loves them.
Yeah, the experience is way better than Bluetooth.
Although Danny Sullivan wrote that he really hates them, mostly because Siri sucks on them. But there's a new Siri.
I was just talking about the Bluetooth, their Bluetooth replacement specifically is people have described as a pretty magical experience.
And there's a whole bunch of others that we should talk about. You know, do you care about optics? Do you invest in like Loomis or Vuzix or?
We haven't done any of those investments yet. We do care about it. Most of our investments tend to be on the software side versus hardware. We have made a few exceptions here and there. For that, mostly, and our thinking around that is mostly like that that hardware companies tend to be very capital intensive businesses. And
risky, right?
And risky from a manufacturing perspective. We saw what happened with Lilly. Unfortunately, that was a great looking product.
Lilly, for people who don't know, was a drone company. I was one of the first journalists to talk with them, and they did all sorts of cool stuff. They got tens of millions of dollars.
$34 million in pre-orders.
$34 million, and they still couldn't convince anybody in China to make them.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. Or it just turns out that it's hard to get your costs down enough to where you can justify the price point you sold them at, right? And so when we look at hardware businesses, it's just like, well, one, it's capital intensive. Two, there's manufacturing risk, and three, the thing that really is the thing that makes it really hard to do is just someone comes out from stealth and is like, by the way, we have this solution that's 10x better than everything else in the market. And because it's we're almost everything in the space now is on the cutting edge of university research, small breakthroughs can have dramatic effects on the entire market. And so for us, we just feel it's a lot. We're more risk tolerant towards businesses that are hardware agnostic. So Scope AR runs on everything. Baobab, it runs on everything. Or businesses that are working on computer vision, which are core algorithms that are hard to replicate and that can be ported to any platform.
Yeah.
The hardware tends to get commoditized faster than software, it seems.
Yes.
Should we switch to categories of content now? Because it's hard to talk about just one company in social VR, for instance. So let's start with social VR.
Sure.
Altspace VR, Sansar from the guys who made Second Life, Linden Labs, or High Fidelity from Philip Rosedale, who also started Second Life, Linden Labs, and split off and started a new company. What are your and like you said, Facebook Toy Box, and there's going to be a whole bunch of them. I think social VR is going to be built into a lot of different experiences. But what's your thinking?
Okay, so let me say this delicately. So my first company was a virtual world company built on top of MySpace and Facebook and so on. The idea is that you had a virtual space, you could decorate it, and you have an avatar. It's just kind of all the main staples. We've seen this business a dozen times in different formats, right? There was Shaker and all these other virtual world-esque companies. And the main takeaway that I had, and I don't have really reason to believe that's going to be very different, at least initially in VR, is that when you have a virtual space and don't really give people direction on what to do, it's very hard to convince people to come back and just like use that space. So like repeat usage is actually the thing that like people will use it once, they're like, oh cool, I could see the potential. But then like when it comes to the practical matter of like, I need to have a meeting or I need to have a conversation or I need to like do something, you know, we as humans, we tend to be like, you know, we tend to be usually use whatever communication medium is the path of least resistance. So like I'll pick up my phone and just text someone if I need that, or if I need to like actually have a voice call and have I'll call you. And so the idea of like going and putting on a headset and then like having an avatar and you like walk to a space and then we have to be like in the same virtual space. It's just like there's like so much work and static friction that like the thing that is causing me to go through all of that to have a conversation with you better be super compelling.
Yeah.
And so we're taking a slightly different tack on social VR, which is focus first on the engagement, on the mechanism, and then build social around it. So, and this has worked in the past. So, like if you look at like World of Warcraft, you know, very famous, massively online multiplayer game, it was a really good single player game first, and then when you added like the idea you can like go, you know, you can group with other people and you can go, you know, fight monsters as like a even a larger party. It ended up creating these like really compelling interactions, and that's what created the magic. So, you know, on the VR side, we've done 2 social investments, or 3. Big Screen is one, and Big Screen is interesting because it's just, you know, it's taking your existing content and making it very easy for you to basically like interact with other people over that content. So like, you know, have like LAN parties and so on. So things that are hard to do in the real world, but much easier to do in VR, and then you build a social around it. So people started off by just like being like, okay, I just want to play my computer games on like a big giant projector screen in a VR headset. And that turned into, cool, my friend can come and we can like play together. And then that turned into, you know, now we can have like full LAN parties. They did like a Rocket League tournament, and there was like, it was like 1,000 people came or something like that. It was insane. Like it's one of the largest, I think the largest virtual LAN party ever hosted. So like, you know, when we look at if we're going to do something that's like claiming to be a social VR investment, we look first at what's the core engagement model and the thing that's going to pull people back every day, and why is that better in VR than every other medium available? Because that's the only thing that's going to cause the social loop to actually end up working.
Social VR for good is one I want to focus on right now. Anoni de la Pena, who was one of the people who was in the room when the Oculus was invented, has started a company called Emblematic. And this year at Sundance, she premiered Out of Exile, which dramatizes a young gay man coming out to his homophobic family. And I really enjoyed that. Do you see a space for venture investment here? And if not, do you see a space for changing the world this way by bringing people into trees that are burning down, stuff like that, you know, and showing off a social problem that might be changed by this technology?
Yeah, 100%. So I'm just curious. I haven't seen that film. Is it in first person? Like, are you in the eyes?
Yeah,
of the person?
This kid had really bad parents and recorded it on audio. His parents really being assholes to him. And you hear the audio and you're experiencing it through his eyes and understanding how deeply hurtful that experience was.
Real audio and then actors playing characters.
Or virtualized things. Right?
I see. Okay.
Or actors, yeah.
So, you know, Chris Milk famously said that VR is an empathy machine. And I mean, I agree. So I do think there are opportunities for this. One is, you know, we're seeing it more. It's VR for good. It's VR for good in kind of a more of a, not like, you know, not necessarily like a charity way, but more like just like small cases. So, you know, there's a lot of there's a big push in Silicon Valley right now to like be more inclusive and diverse with like companies and leadership and so on. And you know, one of the things that we've you know, one of the companies I saw recently is this company called Variable Labs. And what they do is they basically create like diversity training in VR. So like you're in the shoes of someone who like normally, like if you go, like if you start like a job at a tech company, like one of the things that they're required to do is basically provide you with like unconscious bias training. So like how do you ensure that you're being fair with your decision making? Sexual harassment training. How do you make sure that you're appropriate at work? And so one of the things that you can do is you can actually, right now, those trainings are all provided as like you go on the web and you kind of go through like this like PowerPoint presentation. It's like not like 2001 clip art. Like, you know, it's like really bad. Everyone hates doing it. And you see the value in it. You see like, oh yeah, I understand why I'm doing this. But man, just the presentation of this stuff is just really, doesn't really drive home the point. And so what this company's doing is they're basically putting you in the shoes of like, someone who's being like in like a position where you're being sexually harassed or you're the person doing it, right? And the idea is that it's meant to elicit feelings. It's meant to elicit, the sense of empathy and so on, or shame, and you just get this higher fidelity and this just deeper understanding of why these things are actually important. And so I think that VR is just incredible for that. And it's one of the areas that I think there's huge potential is in like training in VR. And this is in this case it's soft skills training, but the idea is you can apply that to other forms as well.
Sports VR.
Oh, yeah. So we're in a company called Striver. And they basically came out of Stanford's VR program, and they started off by essentially giving quarterbacks VR headsets to help them like read plays and make better decisions. And since then, they've sold to like a bunch of college programs, a bunch of NFL teams, and sports. I mean, like, and that's from like the training perspective. So that kind of follows along the lines of what I just said. But even from the viewing perspective, like, I mean, live sports and concerts and all that stuff. I think sports in particular is really great because you get a better sense of immersion. The one thing that's missing from that though is the social aspect. So like as soon as you can like we can both sit courtside and watch a game and we have our floating heads and whatever, and we're just having a conversation and like we feel like we're there with each other. Like that to me is going to be the thing that like just takes off.
I had dinner with the founder of 8i, which is a camera company that does volumetric capture. It's early days for that, but one of the first experiences came out at Sundance. Water Buffalo, if I remember the name right, and I might have forgotten that. But the kids at USC have built an experience where they're using volumetric capture to capture the actors, and it's pretty cool. But he told me, I asked him, when are we going to be able to watch a Warriors game at home on our kitchen table in volumetric and walk around the game and put our head closer to Stephen Curry or whatever? And he thinks it's about 4 years. And even if he's wrong, 8 years, right? So within a decade, we're going to have that kind of experience on our kitchen table, right?
Yeah, and I think well before that, I mean, today you can go if you have a Gear VR, I think even a Daydream device, you can download NextVR and just watch live NBA games from courtside, right? So it's not on your kitchen table, but it's still like it's an awesome experience. So,
what about things like Mindshow? Have you seen Mindshow? Mindshow is a cool, fun thing that you record. You're in a virtual world and you have these characters that you have to record, and I found it really enthralling, and I want to play with my kids in it because I want to record little plays with them at home and be able to interact with the characters in a new way. I found it very, very cool. What do you think?
I think creation in VR is just fun, right? And if it, like whenever people ask me, like, when we're gonna see, what's going to be like the WordPress of VR? I think it's not going to be anything like Unity or anything like that. Like if you think about like the world's best 3D editor is actually Minecraft, right? It's just something that doesn't even seem like an editor. It's usually it's very simple operations. You're placing pixels, you're placing that, right? Or you're removing blocks, you're placing blocks. And so something like Mindshow, I think, and Tilt Brush and like most of these like apps that allow you to create easily they're like some of the more magical experiences in VR. But I do think that they're all gated based on just the adoption of the technology in this case. Like, because in order for these things to be really, really impactful, you need 6 degrees of freedom tracking. You need to be able to track your hands, you need controllers or something like that of that nature. So most of these things, I think that in order for these to become really, really big, you need like you need more people to have that high level of VR, that really excellent quality VR experience, and that's gated on just like hardware.
Yeah.
So,
I loved Chris Milk's new work called Life of Us, where you and a friend get to experience life from an egg all the way through death. And I found it fascinating and fun. But you need two people to really do it right, which means you need two HTC Vives somewhere, or a friend who has an HTC Vive. And this is again back to the problem. We need to solve the technical challenges to get everybody on a phone with 6 degrees of freedom and some controllers in your hands to do, flying and running and dancing and painting, right? Like in a Google tilt brush kind of thing.
Yeah.
What did you think of that? I'm sure you talked to Chris Milk about.
I actually haven't seen that experience.
Okay,
Yeah,
you should. It's cool.
But I can imagine. I mean, even I think that it goes without saying. Just in general, I think a decent rule is that things are better with friends. I mean, that was like the entire basis of Facebook, right? And so that applies to VR as well. I think that trend just continues. In some ways, it highlights the potential of VR because it actually adds that human element to it. So I have no doubt that that's great.
We've run through a lot of companies, a lot of things really fast. Any others that are on
you
your
wanted to talk about spectacles, right?
Oh yeah. Let's talk about that.
Snapchat?
Oh my God. So I almost a year ago, we talked about this, right? And it was like that Snapchat is actually an AR company, right? And Spectacles is their MVP, right? So and I think the big thing, the most important thing that they're doing is they're like, how we met like earlier in this conversation, we're talking about how you can't roll out too much to people too fast.
Yeah.
Like you can't just like give like, you can't go, your first version can't be the iPhone 7. You had to have the iPhone 1 and slowly build up the feature set and slowly normalize and acclimatize people to people need to acclimate to new technology, right? And so
Yep.
so Spectacles
Even
to me,
once you get it, like I said, I got my Vive 7 months ago, right? And I'm still discovering that I'm changing as I use it more. My beliefs about VR are changing, and my experiences are changing because I'm now sitting down for 40-minute experiences and watching things, right? Or watching full-on movies. I didn't do that at first. First of all, there wasn't any, or very few. And second, there were so many games to play, and they were so mind-blowing fun that I played games for a few months with all my kids and stuff. Now I'm sitting down and actually thinking through, using it as an entertainment medium in a different way, right?
yeah. And so definitely, right? And so with Snap and what they're doing is I think everyone's just like, oh, it's just a camera. It's just a camera. Well, I think just even getting people to the point where it's okay to wear a camera on your face. If you look back, I mean, you were in the middle of this, right?
Yep.
With Google Glass and just the stigma associated with it. Just like, and they're smart. Like I think I think Evan's like one of the smartest product guys like of this new generation of entrepreneurs. Like it's
And certainly a great marketing team over there.
yes.
Man,
Just the subtlety of what they're doing is incredible. Like I don't know if you saw the ads, but like everyone doesn't have clothes on.
Yeah.
Like it's just these like small things. Constantly.
They look a lot better without clothes than I do in the shower.
Yeah, people also wore Google Glass
supermodels,
without clothes.
wearing the glasses.
But more importantly, making it a toy. It's like, oh yeah, it's just a toy, it's cheap. It's just like a throwaway thing. Their rollout plan of like, putting the bots around the country. Like they're doing so many smart things with the way they set it up. They're not selling it in San Francisco specifically. They're not selling that may be your fault as well.
It took me 11 days to get one anyways.
I know. Well, I mean, I'm sure.
Everybody wants to go and get one, and if you're motivated, you'll get one, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean,
Luckily, I have a son who lives in New York and picked me up a couple of
So I mean, the people are really, it's different than having one tech guy walk around than having like an entire city of tech people walk around with it, right? But anyways, long story short, is they've rolled out in a way that's really cool. So essentially, as a result of that, they're normalizing the idea that you have a camera on your face, right? And then even when it's on, they have these really bright lights around it, so you know that, hey, this is a camera, it's on. And the hope is that once it becomes a new normal, to be like, okay, yeah, sometimes people have glasses, they have cameras, or something that's like outward facing, it then makes it okay to like wear those all the time. And
Yeah.
And again, we mentioned that part of AR is computer perception. So what do you need for computer perception? Well, you need some sort of visual sensor. And the thing is that even the thing that Apple's working on, it still looks like a camera to some degree. So you have to like get to a point where people aren't freaked out when they see people with these things on their faces.
Yeah.
And so V1, yeah, sure, it's just a camera. V2, if they add a little bit of feedback, even then it's already useful again. And you know that Snapchat already has all the AR tracking technology because they've been, they have filters. They've been using lightweight AR in their applications, in their core app for a very long time. And a lot of people use it. I mean, that's like one of the most common things. You see the dog face or whatever. So it's a very clear path for them to take those glasses and just iterate and add one feature. And before you know it, you have a really lightweight AR device. So I definitely wouldn't count those guys out as a potential for having the first mass market consumer AR device.
Yeah. Anything else, Austin?
If we want to talk about Facebook's lawsuit, I would be curious what you guys are thinking about that, but we've also been going for a while, so we can wrap up either way.
I think that's a big lawsuit. It's going to be decided in the next week, right? The jury is going to decide whether this little company gets $4 billion of Mark Zuckerberg's money.
Oh my God! I mean, so look, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a builder, and we all know that maybe if there's a technicality where like ZeniMax gets paid out damages or whatever, like the reality is that there's so much work and insight and like development that had to happen by the entire team, of Oculus, that like it's probably unlikely that any of this was actually their property to begin with. But if there is a technicality where they win, that's unfortunate because it just, I think it.
It slows down this industry.
Yeah, it slows down the industry, and it's just like it's not good for that. And also, just like you just realize that it's just like it's one of these cases where it's almost like a patent lawsuit, like software patent lawsuit. It's just okay, yeah, you filed this patent and you bought it, but now you're not actually doing anything with it. And if like someone didn't go and build this didn't do all the hard work and had the insight to go build a massive business here, you wouldn't even think twice about it.
Yeah,
So.
It's the downside of our capitalist system with patents and stuff like that, right?
Well, it's more the rent-seeking side of it, right?
Yeah,
So,
but people take advantage of where patents were to protect innovators and give them a monopoly for 17 years, right? So that they had a chance to build their company and build and get new ideas to consumers.
Yes.
Like this, right? This is a good example. VR is new. I didn't have it a year ago. Now I do. And my life is better because of that. We want to encourage more things like that to happen. And unfortunately, some people take advantage of this system.
So I think the hypothetical here is that I think one of the things that pushed Oculus forward was John Carmack joining and putting his name behind it and like really contributing to it. And he's a kind of titan of industry, right? But at that time, if even before he joined, ZeniMax had made a statement saying, hey, like if you hire John away, like we are going to sue whatever company. Like would Oculus still have taken that chance? And then would have Facebook have bought Oculus as a result of, I think a big part of that was just getting all the great talent that Oculus had accumulated. Like what was like the alternative history look like? And I wonder that like and then you can argue that the Facebook acquisition of Oculus is also what kicked off this huge like kind of the entire industry to some degree because people show there's something real here. So, but if you go all the way back to, hey, like, John Carmack was never ended up joining Oculus because, because it was clear that if he did, this was going to happen. Like, will we have the VR, will we all be using Vives today?
Nope.
Probably not.
Nope. China, let's go back to China because I think that's the biggest interesting market for entrepreneurs. Now, China is really awesome at making things, so I think we're going to see competitors to Apple from Huawei and HTC and all sorts of other places. So let's leave that on the table. Where do you think the real opportunity for Americans are to play in the Chinese market? Like
that's
Silicon Valley. What
Yeah,
Silicon Valley's play in China? Because it's really a hard market to get into and
Yeah.
deal with and build in.
So we've, the way that we see it is that if you're a content studio that has decent content that's like short form, it's actually perfectly well suited for VR arcades. Especially like all these 5-minute experiences and stuff, because that's what people are going to be doing there. It's like, you go and you're paying by the hour, basically. You use VR. So short form experiences are actually pretty great. Especially if you cut them in a way that it can be a standalone machine or whatever. So my partner Phil was one of the creators of the HTC Vive. He founded the VR team at HTC and is actually based in Hong Kong. And so what we do with our portfolio companies is we kind of send them over to Phil, and Phil has all these connections with like the internet cafes in Hong Kong and all these other places, and it makes it very easy for us to actually get them their content distributed. I think the hard thing, the really hard thing, is that like content in particular is just like people just pirate it. So the other place that we're finding some wins is that if you have like any sort of core technology that a lot of the headset manufacturers can use, and you can like license it out to a lot of them, that ends up being another interesting business, because there's a lot. So if you go to China, there's two things you'll notice immediately. One is a lot of custom, like a lot of location-based entertainment, like VR arcades. The other thing is how many headsets they have, like companies you've never heard of, brands you've never heard of, and there will be a time, just like with phones, where we get to pure commoditization of VR hardware. We're not there yet, and there will always be these like kind of like these like big brands, like the Samsungs and the HTCs of the world. But there's no reason why this technology can't be mostly commoditized, especially since most of the secret sauce is going to be in the software and the SDKs, which Valve is open sourced and is handed over to the Kronos group. So the software is solved, and so it just comes down to the hardware. And then the hardware, you go there and there's all the headsets. I mean, they're terrible headsets, don't get me wrong. But you see the demand for these things. You see the demand for cheaper hardware. And I do think that if you're a company that provides core technology these hardware companies can use, there's potentially an opportunity there as well.
VR at work, we talked a little bit about that. Do you have any insight of what's coming for using, like a WebEx, only you're in a virtual world and there's all sorts of tools to let me work or design? Ford is designing cars in VR. Disney designed its new Shanghai theme park in VR. So people are working in VR. Where do you see that going?
So we've seen a lot of VR at work companies. Big Screen originally started off as that, like you can, it was meant for like pair programming and so on. The issue with, there's a couple things holding back VR for work. One is the screen resolution is just not high enough for text. So it's really hard to do anything that requires text.
It's getting there, though. Mayron said he answered 90 emails this morning in Meta, right? Of course, he's willing to put up with a lot of pain because he's trying to push his company forward.
And which I, that's one of the reasons we backed him, right? Is that he's like, he's a believer and he's aggressive like that. So that's awesome. And so Meta is a good example of this. I think there's going to be specific use cases where it works really well. I think for right now, artists can use VR to build, to actually replace some of their core workflow. Yeah. So we're seeing that already with
Tilt Brush,
Medium, Quill, and so on. So that's great. People at VR, like game studios that are using Unreal or Unity, can start using VR at work. They can start using the in VR editors to get a sense of scale and so on. So that's great. So any programs that are soon, any apps that are built on top of those two platforms will be able to. You can start using VR for your stuff there. But the way I think one of the more interesting things about VR for work is when you start thinking about VR as a way of replacing dependence on atoms, right? So if you think about it, our workspaces are completely constrained by physical space in a lot of ways. So you used the number of screens example earlier. So The really obvious one is you have a virtual desktop and you have like, rather than just 2 physical screens, you have like 15, right? And you're a trader at like, you're in a finance industry and you have you're at a Bloomberg terminal and you have like 5 screens, all the information about your portfolio on the screens. Instead of having these physical screens, you just have one VR headset, and you don't even have to be at work. You can be in the airport or like on wherever at home, and just put on your VR headset, and you have your exact same desktop there. That's a compelling vision. But again, I think that is specifically gated by screen resolution. So I think there's going to be a direct correlation between screen resolution and adoption of VR for a lot of like work-related tasks.
I'm going to put a thesis out there that the Apple phones are going to be fairly low resolution compared to some of the things we need. They're going to be 2K screens probably on the glasses and 2K screens on the phone. They're going to be mind-blowing screens from what I hear in terms of color and in terms of battery life and in terms of dynamic range, right? Looking at photos on these new next generation OLED screens are beautiful, right? But the resolution is being held down by a whole bunch of factors, right?
Yep.
There's trade-offs you have to make as a hardware guy. If you want to put 4K screens and everything, it costs more, it takes more data, it takes more battery life, blah, blah, blah.
So Apple's not going to use retinal projection, is what you're saying?
Not yet. Not that I expect this year. I mean, this is the first product to get people excited, and then we'll see where it goes from there, right?
That's a great. Well, I don't disagree with you. If you look traditionally at what Apple's done, almost always their stuff's been somewhat under spec'd, right? As a trade-off for like form factor or like focusing more on the user experiences. Like, I have no doubt that seems to be the right. That seems in line with their new product launch strategies.
It sounds like
the thing that the nerds always complain about with Apple. They're like
every time, yeah. But they're completely missing the point, which is what they've done is they've basically reduced by going a little bit back in specs. What they're doing is they're giving themselves more room to innovate on form factor, and also then it forces them to not use the technology, the hardware specifications as a way of creating user experience. That means they have to think a lot harder about like how are people actually going to use this. And so I'll make a prediction here. That I do think that the main use case for any sort of Apple VR era device is going to be 2D media consumption, specifically existing media. So iTunes, Netflix, HBO, Hulu. In fact, I'll even go further and say that for most people, their first active, common use case for VR or mobile VR in any way is going to be that specifically, just consuming existing content in a more immersive way.
Yeah.
Like on a movie theater screen or whatever.
Back to the future television, because the TV's going to give you full body VR. Yep. It's gonna have a prime 3D sensor on it. The glasses are going to have a 3D sensor. The iPhone's going to have a 3D sensor, and the iPad's going to have a 3D sensor. So once you get all these devices, they're going to lock together on the new 3D map that's coming out, and you're going to get that use case for sure. They're going to show that off. But we're also chasing Pokemon, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
But Pokemon is going to be the first demo. Come on.
You think so?
I think so.
Maybe.
I think so. That's demo number one. There's going to be probably 20 demos. Some of your companies are going to be on stage with Tim Cook talking about what they do, many of which we just talked about in this conversation, right?
So how will Pokemon look different? It'll be that the character
it'll be
interacts
full
with the
on
world
mixed
instead of
reality.
just being imposed.
Pokemon characters will be walking around the room.
It'll hide
right?
behind my computer.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, it's going to be full on mixed reality. It's not going to be faked AR, right? It's going to be full on, let's get it all, and you can hold up your phone and look for them, or you can wear glasses and look for them. And that's just one little tiny demo, but it makes sense it would be the first one, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
Is it still popular?
Oh, yeah. People know about it.
Yeah.
And that's the first goal, right? If you come out with a mixed reality Pokemon, like a new Pokemon, then everybody will play it again for another weekend, right?
There's a
You got to try it out.
There's a Pokemon gym right outside my apartment, and so there were crowds for a while, and I haven't seen anyone out there playing in
No, they'll come
2
back.
3 months.
When you get a new toy, you get play with it for a
Yeah.
weekend, and then you go back to life, right? But there'll be many things like we've been talking all for the last hour on. It's been really cool talking with you and hearing your perspective because you're seeing so much.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Cool. Well, we can wrap up here. So if you want to listen to more episodes of this podcast, go to vrpodcast.inside.com. Also, subscribe to our email newsletter. It's inside.com/VRAR, and we publish it a couple times a week with all the most interesting news and products and people and that type of thing, sometimes with thoughts from Robert Scoble as well. So inside.com/VRAR. And we always like reviews on iTunes, so leave one of those if you liked what you heard. And thank you, Amitt, for joining us. And that's about it. Have a good day.